everyone. My name is Carlos Perron, and welcome to Geekfest Rants. I have today joining me James. Say hi, James.
Hi, everybody.
Today we're going to be tackling the subject of breaking news. J.J. Abrams is going to apparently be directing the actual next Star Wars film, which is something that is a little bit of a shock to everybody. Not so much because it's J.J. Abrams in terms of him being a talented director, but the fact that initially his name was kind of dismissed at first. Later on the show, we're also going to be hearing from Tony and Brian and some of our other contributors, to get their opinion on this apparent decision. So let's begin with James. From what you know, how did that news hit you?
I received a text saying J.J. Abrams, and that's all it said. And I'm like, yes. I'm responding in yes. And then the next thing came back, another text that said Star Wars. And I was like, for real? Are you kidding? And I immediately went to Ain't It Cool and a couple other websites that I trust. And there was a bit of a little tease there, or a little suggestion that this was a rumor and probably factual. So as the day went on, obviously, all of the people I work with that are fans of movies and Star Wars just started buzzing around and talking to each other. What do you think? Is this true? I pretty much believed it as soon as I heard it. I know it's hard to believe things anymore because there's so much stuff out there popping up, but something about it made me feel like, yeah, this is probably accurate, because we had heard so many names, including his,
yes,
that pop up and were poo-pooed. And something about it, he's just too big of a fan. Everything I read about him getting involved in Star Trek was basically because he was such a Star Wars fan that he wanted to do something that was involved in a space epic, but Star Wars wasn't available. There was no Star Wars anymore. And it just seemed to me something like that you only get once in a lifetime, basically, or you only get once in a lifetime opportunity to put your stamp on it. Had he done the second or third movie, stuff is already established, kind of like Harry Potter and Chris Columbus. Everything Chris Columbus created is what followed through up into movie 8, So it was just too big of an opportunity, I think, for a guy like JJ, who has basically all the power in Hollywood right now in terms of picking and choosing. And I was thrilled with the idea. And not because I love him or anything. In fact, I really don't love him. I like Star Trek and I like his work. I just feel his enthusiasm falls off, usually in his TV projects more so. Lost was huge and people loved it, and then it got muddled in the middle when he started to get involved in other projects. Alias was fantastic. It was basically female James Bond on TV. Everybody loved it. And then it got very disjointed and confused, and it disappeared eventually after, I think, the 4th season or so. Felicity, now people tended to always want to blame her haircut, but maybe it involved him kind of losing interest or moving on to other projects. And so this pattern stuck with me, and I'm figuring, well, maybe after this Star Trek, he may not be as involved. I figured he definitely would produce the next Star Trek, but maybe the third one he wouldn't direct. So now here we have this new Star Wars environment for him to play in. Now, it's probably just right for him to do 1, maybe 2 movies, because as we could see with George Lucas, he did 1, he passed the baton to Irvin Kershner, he was fantastic, and then Richard Marquand, which was almost an extension of George Lucas without George having to do the day-to-day. In this situation, I feel JJ has a very good relationship with Disney and movie companies like that. He's trusted, he gets movies done on time, he gets them in pretty much under budget. His production facility and his people are very adequate in terms of what they do. They always have a good story, and, the movies look great. So I don't have a problem with this at all. It's still basically being run by Lucasfilm. He'll have a lot of input, I'm sure, in terms of how it looks, casting. I still think the first story is somewhat of a George Lucas creation in terms of the story itself. That's my guess. He's gone but not forgotten at this point, I feel.
We know for a fact that Lucas is definitely coming up with the concept and the idea of the story, and then they have the, gun-for-hire screenwriter to flesh out the story, to write it down, and the director then takes over after that. We don't know how much J.J. Abrams will meddle with the story, because who knows? I mean, a director should have some autonomy to be able to tweak things a little here and there.
If I were to guess, my guess is the story is somewhat established, the layout of what they want, A, B to C to D. I feel then once that script is finished, that's when JJ or his people are able to polish it in a manner in which he's happy with. And that is a benefit for us because, like I said, we can trust him. We can trust his work. And at the very least, as an obsessed fan that he's described himself as, I can't imagine him letting it fall apart. Now, if he steps aside and only is involved in production after that, or if he's only a director for this particular film, obviously it's too soon. It's only been basically confirmed. There's really nothing else for us to go on.
Right.
I have a good feeling that if a good movie was going to be made, he's the guy who could do it. Another guy mentioned was Guillermo del Toro. I feel like his movies are a little bit out there, and the Star Wars world is pretty much established, and other directors would probably want to do it in their style, and that's somewhat good, but it's also dangerous if that particular director has a history of making an elaborate type of style decision. JJ will probably keep it, at least to start with, in our expectations, in the realm of our expectations.
Let me ask you something. Based on J.J. Abrams' track record as far as his films go, which he doesn't have a huge track record. He did Mission Impossible 3, then he did Super 8, and then he did Star Trek. Can you see Star Wars coming out of a background like that?
Yeah, because I think he has proven himself as, I don't want to say the word geek since this is Geekfest Rants, but he does have that, his filmography, Super 8 and Cloverfield, and
even though Cloverfield he only produced.
I know, but there was an influence. He had an influence on it. And those type of things, he knows what the people want. He knows what the geeks want, the people who are fans of this. And I can't imagine it being a bad thing because he's going to make a movie he wants to sit down and watch, I believe. And that's good for us. Where there's other directors who want to make a piece of art, who want to make... No, this Star Wars isn't art. If art comes out of it, fantastic. Star Wars is make the people happy. And I think that's where he's going to go.
Well, let's take a listen to a couple of our contributors who are also going to chime in on their opinions on what they think of this announcement about J.J. Abrams directing the next Star Wars film. All right, we're here with Tony and Brian, and we wanted to just get their reaction to the news that apparently J.J. Abrams is going to be the next director of a Star Wars film. Now, we've had a show a couple of weeks ago where we talked about all the possibilities of where all this might go, and J.J. Abrams' name was thrown out there, but from what I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, initially it was kind of dismissed right away because he didn't seem that interested in it, and we were figuring, you know what, he's already a Star Trek guy, he's not going to mix genres like that, so we kind of let his name go, and other names started popping up, and they were becoming more possible that there was going to be somebody else. But then all of a sudden, a couple days ago, out of nowhere, J.J. Abrams' name comes up, and first it's a rumor, then a couple of websites confirm it, and then even Lucasfilm and StarWars.com, they're saying, yes, he is the guy that we just hired, and he's going to do it. Now, Tony, tell me, first of all, how you feel about this.
I like J.J. Abrams for the role. He's got some sci-fi experience. He directed Super 8 and the first Star Trek film. So he's got those chops behind him. I think even though he's criticized sometimes for his storytelling technique and plot holes and such, I think if he's working off a script that somebody else is writing, working with that person, I think that's a problem that can be avoided. And I think he does tend to put a lot of heart and emotion into his stories. It's not just about the plot. He does really well at developing good characters that people care about. So I'm on board for that. I do have a question, though. Is JJ signed to do a Star Trek trilogy, or is this next movie his next last one, possibly?
As far as I know, he is not obligated to direct anything else. He is obligated to produce a third film. He was never obligated to direct at all, including the first two films. He chose to direct them. Bad Robot is obligated to do at least one more Star Trek film.
I can see, if he's got to do a Star Wars movie and then another Star Trek movie, that could seem a little overwhelming. But if he's not committed to directing a third one, then maybe it would work out.
Do you have any issues with one person doing two big genres so close to each other? This is the equivalent of like Peter Jackson all of a sudden doing Star Wars. He's got a big franchise under his belt, and so does Abrams, even though it's only one movie. Star Trek, there's a lot of baggage with Star Trek.
I think there might be. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Are Trekkies much more invested in their movie than Star Wars people are in theirs, or you think it's about even?
That's a tough question because I would say Trekkies are very invested in their movies.
Yeah.
But there's a huge amount of Trekkies that are not invested in J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He's very polarizing in the Star Trek fan community.
Even though his film is supposed to be an alternate universe or an alternate timeline, it still ticked off a lot of fans.
Yeah, the liberties he took with the characters and the way, it's not what would be called traditional Trek. And half the fan base hates it and the other half loves it. So it's the new Coke as opposed to the classic Coke, I guess. I don't know. The reaction I've seen on the boards is there are a lot of people that are actually relieved that he's leaving Star Trek and are happy he's going to Star Wars.
After the second one, the second Star
they're
Trek.
pleased that he's actually leaving.
Okay.
What was your reaction to J.J. Abrams' Star Trek movie?
My initial reaction is I didn't like it very much.
Okay.
Over time, I've grown to accept it for what it is, which is an action-adventure, big screen version of the original series. So it's going to be different, And over time, I've grown to enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to the second one very much. But I know several people, including some people who work on this podcast, who hate it with a passion. I think, getting back to Abrams himself, I think his sensibility, he's much more of a Star Wars guy. He's even said this in interviews, that he grew up loving Star Wars. Star Trek's something kind of like growing up, but he didn't care about it. And you could see him injecting elements of Star Wars into Star Trek.
Well, they kept saying when Star Trek came out that he was trying to, or at least they were giving him credit for Star Warsing up Star Trek.
Right, like Kirk looking at the Enterprise, is Luke looking at the twin suns. Like, there's little things like that. Personally, I'm really excited to see him go to do Star Wars because I think he will be amazing at it. In fact, I don't think there's anybody outside of Steven Spielberg that could do a better job doing this. I really think he's the best possible choice. I was shocked. I think we all were. I mean, Bad Robot is pretty much entrenched at Paramount, doing Star Trek and Mission Impossible. He did Super 8 there. A lot of his other feature projects are all at Paramount. So it was shocking to see this come to pass. But I'm really excited about it. I think he's absolutely perfect for it.
Now, why do you think at first, when the reports were coming out and other directors' feedback started coming out, that initially he was the one, I think, saying that no, he was not going to be involved in this at all, or, we're not thinking of him, or that sort of thing. Why do you think it was kind of deflected at first? You think it was just a negotiating tactic that all these directors go through?
From what I understand, he truly did not want to do it for a while. But Kathleen Kennedy and Steven Spielberg both kept singing his praises to Lucas, who also knows him, I think. And then apparently Kennedy just put the full court press on him and kept coming after him and coming after him and coming after him. I mean, look, we're going to find out more soon, I think, when Abrams actually speaks about it. But from what I understand, she really put the sales pitch on him to get him to do it. And it was probably complicated, too, because like I said, he's kind of all tied up into Paramount and Star Trek and everything else, and dislodging him from that and getting him in Lucasfilm and Disney and all that probably took a little bit of lawyering.
Now, for this thing to come out in 2.5 years, because it's really going to be most likely a summer film, I imagine, he has to finish up the post-production on Star Trek rather fast and start cracking with pre-production, right?
Well, Star Trek's coming out this summer, right?
Right, but Star Wars is in theory coming out in
2015.
2015, which
I would
means,
assume a summer tentpole film.
Right, so he doesn't have the full 15. He only has half a year in 15. So you're looking at about...
So essentially they need to finish the script quickly, then get casting, sets, shoot the movie, and...
To me, it almost seems like they have less time than they normally do.
Well, it usually seemed like Lucas, it took him 3 years per movie.
At least.
So I don't know what they have in mind for this new set, for this new trilogy. Again, this is just based on what I know of J.J. Abrams' TV past. But if you look at Alias, the foundation is a relationship, father and daughter. Look at Lost. A lot of these stories are based on fathers and their children. Look at Fringe, father and son. My guess is the story might have... Maybe he's got something in his head, a story, maybe the children of Luke and Han or something, and somehow it's going to involve, all these guys.
But keep in mind, he's not writing it. The story, from what I understand, is coming from Lucas, the concept of the story.
Okay.
Then there's a screenwriter that was hired. His name was
Arndt, who
Michael
did Toy
Arndt.
Story 3.
So he's going to flesh out the story that Lucas is coming up with, and I guess J.J. Abrams is going to interpret that script.
But if J.J. Abrams wants to tweak something in the story, does he have that power?
Who knows?
I would assume.
I don't think he's being hired as a hired gun. I mean, he's being hired because he's J.J. Abrams.
Right.
He's going to make tweaks to it, too. I mean, obviously, with George's blessing, I don't think he'll do anything without George's blessing.
Right, and you can't. I'm sure nobody's is going to be doing like a complete 180 on anything Lucas writes. I mean, yes, they can change it and shape it a little bit, but they can't just negate everything that he wants to put onto the screen.
George's stories aren't the problem. It's his scripts that are the problem.
Yeah.
Maybe Abrams signed on because he saw potential in what the storyline was going to be, that it is something that is up his alley.
Mm-hmm.
I guess technically, even Star Trek, going back to the whole father-son thing, isn't Star Trek, what he did with that, a bit of a father-son, the father passing the heritage down to the son with Kirk's father getting killed in the beginning, and then Kirk trying to live up to his reputation. So,
and even with Spock, there's a father-son or family and son type of conflict going on there.
So to me, I think
that was pre-existing in the Star Trek franchise, Sarek and Spock.
Right, the Kirk thing was brand new.
Right.
Yeah,
and Star Wars also just has that whole dynamic of Luke saving his father, and something else could happen down the road. Maybe they're going to go the family route. So I mean, Abrams can do action, but he can also do the emotion you need to connect with the character. So I'm hoping he's a good fit for the role.
Cool. Thanks, guys. James, let me ask you a question, which is, this is something that, again, it's too early to know at this point, but as far as casting goes, who exactly has the final word on casting? Does Lucas have a word in it? Is it Disney? Is it Abrams? Do we have any clue which way casting might go?
At this moment, I don't know of any decisions that have been made. I would say you're sure to get participation by a lot of originals, in the sense Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill for sure, since they were actually clued into this whole thing while it was in the planning stage. I can't imagine you not having the droids in it, since Tony Daniels is still around and able to participate. And Chewbacca, I would imagine he's a fan favorite, so I can't see how you wouldn't. I feel like this would be a good omen, a good harbinger for Harrison Ford's participation. It's a very loose connection, but JJ was a writer on Regarding Henry, which was a pretty successful Harrison Ford movie, one of his last, really successful ones that people really liked. However, I just feel good about this choice. He's trusted by actors and by fans. So I think it's just everything coming together in the right way thus far, assuming there's a story that can be managed and told in a fun way. And I can't imagine how Disney, Lucasfilm 2.0, and JJ would let that slip through their fingers. I think we have a good opportunity in our hands to see some really fun Star Wars for, I guess you could say, for a new generation, and for us to be brought back in. If you weren't as thrilled with the prequels, this is your opportunity to, forget about them a little bit and move forward. And I'm looking forward to it at this point. Everything so far has made me feel good. None of it has made me cringe yet.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. I am a fan of what Abrams has done, not only on his few films, but on television. I wasn't really into Alias, but Lost was huge for me. And I do know that he might get a little more credit than he deserves for Lost, because he was apparently only involved in the production of the show as far as starting the show. And then once the show started, he backed away from it. And the new executive producers are the ones who kind of ran the ship and made the decisions as to where to go with the story. But as far as his films go, like I said before, Mission Impossible 3 was a huge, huge improvement over Mission Impossible 2. Super 8, I remember it was an homage to Spielberg films, to Close Encounters and E.T. and that sort of thing. And, I liked that film. I wasn't completely in love with it, but I really liked it. It was an entertaining, family kind of go-see type of film. And Star Trek blew me away. I mean, I'm a big fan of the Star Trek films. I really don't have too much of a preference in terms of saying I only go for the older Star Trek or the newer Star. What they did with the new one, which I remember they were promoting it as, they were going to Star Wars-ize Star Trek. They were going to make it more modern, more relevant to younger people nowadays. That was a home run. I mean, I watched it with my son. He loved it. I enjoyed it. I watched it at home sometimes. It's still very entertaining to me. So this particular choice of director, to me, as far as his pedigree goes, it's right there. It's a good fit. Who knows? Can one person handle two big franchises? Can one person, hit it?
I say yes, because Lucas was able to handle Star Wars and Raiders. at the same time. Spielberg was able to handle his huge movies that came out in the early 80s and Raiders at the same time. So I don't think that's a problem. Scheduling, obviously, if he had obligations,
Right.
you know, I don't know what the Star Trek obligations are. Like I said, my guess is he wasn't going to direct the third Star Trek anyway. So this doesn't pose a problem to that then. You know, and as far as you mentioned earlier, how Star Trek was Star Wars-ized or whatever in JJ's style. I didn't want to like Star Trek. I went in almost under duress, like I had to go as a Star Trek fan, but I didn't want to like it. And as soon as the opening title hit the screen, I was blown away. At that point, it's like, yeah, this is great. This is as good as it gets. And he even did a couple things in the movie, like you said, Star Wars style, when Kirk is in the ice planet, and I felt like it was like a Wampa type thing, you know? Wasn't there a situation like that, and Spock had to neutralize the monster?
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to be okay with Star Wars.
Well, as it's happened more than once here, just when we're about to put the show to bed, breaking news comes along that apparently announcement was made that Lucasfilm will be delaying the release or postponing, they're phrasing it as a postponement, the release of Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith in 3D, which was supposed to come out a little later this year. Did you hear the same thing that I heard, James?
Yeah, I'm disappointed. You actually got me into that news, and then I looked for it myself. And I'm actually disappointed because at first I thought the whole 3D thing was a big goof. I didn't think it was a good idea, you know, a couple of years ago when it was first announced. Lately, after seeing episode 1, I thought it was a great idea because so many kids have not seen it, specifically kids your children's age and my nephews and people like that have not seen them in the theater. So it gave them the opportunity to see it on the big screen with a little bit more modern twist to it because of the 3D gimmick. But after I saw episode 1, it looked nice, and the 3D wasn't terrible, and you know, it was pretty good. It was a nice little addition. So I was really looking forward to it, and when I had heard you had seen clips at the convention that showed episode 2 and 3, and it looked good, you know, I figured, hey, this is going in the right direction at least. It's getting people in there, and it's getting people excited a little bit again, even if it's just a handful of fans. And then I read, oh, well, this is because it didn't make a lot of money. It only made $23 million or something like that. Well, $23 million for a movie that was 10 years old, that's out on DVD and Blu-ray, well, that's pretty good, I guess. You know what I mean? It's like, maybe it cost too much in promotion, so it didn't offset. But I was disappointed because, of course, after episode 2 and 3 later this year, then we were hoping next year would be, you know, at least episode 4, A New Hope, maybe even Empire Strikes Back next year, and then, of course, Jedi, which would still have worked, leading us to episode 7 in 2015 when they're talking about the release. But my guess is they don't want competing Star Wars out there. They want to dictate, and maybe dictate's too strong a word. They want to control the message. They want to have everything leading up to the ultimate finale of the release of episode 7. And I know JJ's like that too. He likes to have control of things and have it all leading, like little snippets, a little comment here and there, and then the teaser trailer, then the real trailer, then the movie. So it all makes sense not to have something that's so far in the past. But again, on the other side of the coin, I thought it'd be a great opportunity to build up excitement for the people who are going to see it. And maybe it would have gotten more money closer to Star Wars Empire and Jedi, A New Hope, I should say, Empire and Jedi. You know, episode 1 was the weakest of all of them, probably. So that's my little take on it. It's too bad, but I understand why.
Well, I remember, like you mentioned before, during the Celebration 6 convention back in August, that I did attend a couple of panels where they were displaying the 3D technology, and they were explaining to you, you know, how it was done, and the fact that they were currently, at the time, you know, putting the finishing touches on episode 2, and had possibly also started working on episode 3. And they did show us clips and, you know, a little kind of like a sizzle reel of high-end, you know, special effects scenes from episode 2 and how they looked in 3D, because they handed out 3D glasses to everybody there. So everybody actually experienced what it looked like. And when the convention finished, the last day of the convention, one of the final events that I attended was the closing ceremonies, which were somewhat disappointing for other reasons. But one of the things they announced and showed us was a couple of clips from episode 3. And then they made the announcement that, hey, guess what, guys? You're getting episode 2 and 3 next year, not just 2, because originally the plan was supposed to be 1 movie a year for the next, 5 or 6 years. And then last year, all of a sudden, it looks like they're rushing to do 2 and 3 in the same year, at least the release dates, which, we started speculating, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that they don't think there's enough interest on it? So they're trying to rush it. They want to get to the original films, faster than anticipated this way. Cause, we all figure that the big fans of Star Wars want to see the original trilogy in 3D, but who knows? And that's what they were promoting at the time, as little as, 6 months ago. But yeah, now all of a sudden the plans have changed. And, now granted, they're not saying it's not happening. They're calling it a postponement. So I don't know. Maybe they have another manner of doing it. Maybe this is more of a, Disney's in charge now. You want to promote Star Wars? Give us some money to promote Star Wars. You know what I mean? Because up to this point, Lucas was the one who was forking the money to do all these 3D conversions. So now that Disney's in charge, why would Lucas, put his own money up to promote something that is going to benefit Disney probably more?
Exactly. And I think because the original 6 movies are still tied in through Fox and Lucas, at least partly through Fox and mostly, I guess it's Lucasfilm, but even though that part is Disney, Disney probably doesn't want to have to be in bed with Fox until they want to know what they have, and they want to focus on making it a fantastic reappearance of the Star Wars universe rather than spending money on the release, like I said. So I think it's going to work out that we will see it at some point, maybe in between 7, 8, to try to bridge the gap if they're going to work it every 3 years. I think I would imagine Disney will tighten that up a little bit, maybe every 2 years, but I guess we'll have to see.
What's amazing is that, as far as I'm concerned, they're pretty much done with episode 2. That was pretty much done. That thing was in the can. They were really concentrating on episode 3 at this point. So this thing is complete. So it's really odd that, it's not like, oh, it's so much work to do, we can't do it. No, 2 was pretty much done. I believe it was supposed to be released, pretty soon originally. So again, I hope it's a postponement, and I hope they do come back at some point and continue doing those in some shape or form. Because like you said before, I was looking forward to being able to have my kids attend the real movie theater and see these films in a big screen for the first time. They finally got to see Phantom Menace previously, so it would have been nice for them to go through all, 6 films like I did in a movie theater, with the bonus of it being in 3D, which they really enjoyed when they saw Phantom Menace last year.
I think if they get to the point where they need filler, they could run like 2 movies, or they can tighten it up, a movie a month type of thing or something. It's just so expensive to re-release movies nowadays with promotion to get people into the theaters that I think that's why they want to focus on episode 7. And I can't blame them. Like I said, I do understand it. I'm disappointed because I do like to see at least episode 4, 5, and 6 on the big screen. But it's Star Wars. As much as I complain about, they're putting it on 3D, I was one of the first people there in line for episode 1 3D, so I'm just a sucker. And I think there's a lot of people like me.
No kidding. And you're talking to one of them right here. Anyway, thanks a lot, James. Well, this brings us to the end of today's episode. Hopefully, we will hear some more information soon. I would imagine casting is going to be the next big news to come, because we kind of know the writer already. We kind of know that, hopefully, I don't know if they'll get their hands on John Williams. I don't know if he'll be around or available and, be able to do the next score for this film. But as soon as information starts to kind of drip in, we'll start analyzing. We'll talk to our friends, our contributors, and we'll bring it back to you guys. So I'd like to thank James. Thank you, James, for joining us. And also Tony and Brian. And, of course, you guys for listening. And we will see you here next time here on Geekfest Rants. Bye-bye, everybody.
Stop.